Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar that we're offering today. My name's Terry Link. I want to thank you for joining us on these programs that we're calling Building Successful Rural and Small Community Recycling and Waste Reduction Programs. These sessions arise from research done over the past 8 months by my colleague Bill Stow and I. This research project has been graciously and generously supported by the MSU Center for Community and Economic Development as part of their Comprehensive Economic Recovery Initiative. Our research has included identifying and interviewing more than a dozen leaders involved in recycling and waste reduction, visiting numerous recycling and waste reduction centers, and reviewing the written research. For the sessions we are offering today, we have invited a few of these doers and thinkers to share their experiences that might assist small and rural communities trying to start or enhance their own waste reduction and recycling operations. Our final report for the MSU Center for Community and Economic Development will be completed before the end of the year, and you will be able to find it on their website. As seasoned veterans of recycling and waste reduction efforts, Bill and I recognize that the dominant waste system, when it does address waste reduction, will at least offer recycling as a viable solution. While we are longtime supporters of effective and environmental beneficial recycling, we also recognize that it is a tailpipe solution and that it is all the more challenging for small and rural communities where distances and sufficient quantities make recycling efforts with a desirable profit margin elusive. The session that we're doing this afternoon will focus on alternatives to the dominant waste system. We are fortunate and pleased to bring 3 panelists to the session this afternoon with experience in moving beyond recycling to other waste reduction activities. Neil Seldman is co-founder of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance in Washington, D.C., and the director of their Waste to Wealth initiative and a founding member of the National Recycling Coalition. He has been active in the field for decades, authoring numerous reports and studies on the subject of waste. Jacob Hanna is a conservation coordinator with the Coalfields Development. He's got a bachelor's degree in management for sustainability from Bucknell University. He studied cultural sustainability in France and Scotland and spent 3 years testing triple bottom line sustainability concepts for coal towns in central Pennsylvania and social sustainability programs in Western Maryland. Bruce Odom is the founder of Odom Reusable Building Materials, a 20-year-old business in the Traverse City area dedicated to recovering and repurposing building materials. Bruce recently retired the business, but his blood still pulses with the knowledge that waste reduction is a viable and necessary function. So what we really are hoping to do here is begin with a brief introduction of each of these panelists to give us a brief overview of their work and the populations that they serve, so you get a sense of where they're working and what they're doing. So let's kick it off with Jacob. Jacob, do you want to lead us off?
Sure thing. And just for some visual aid, I'm going to share my screen real quick for folks. So got a little presentation that I'll share. All right. You see this all right?
Yep.
Great. So thanks for the introduction. As mentioned earlier, my name is Jacob Hanna. I'm the conservation coordinator of the Coalfield Development. We are here in Huntington, West Virginia. So West Virginia has a myriad of issues, which I'm sure can be relatable to some of our folks here today. It's the nation's lowest labor participation rate, nation's second lowest higher education rate, high need for economic diversification. Coal has been the predominant driving economic factor in the region. It's been a mono economy, really, with all the infrastructure built up to serve that one industry. And now that that is out of play or declining rapidly, there's a bit of a power vacuum that's created in its absence. And so you have all these secondary factors really springing up because of it. And now we have the nation's highest opioid overdose rate in America as well. So again, a lot of issues that make things like recycling sort of the last thing on people's mind, even though it is a massive contributor, or the absence of it is a massive contributor to the health of the public. And so our organization is sort of positioned to try and help address that in a way that satisfies what we call triple bottom line, which is people, planet, and profit all integrated together to complement each other to create solutions that help folks who are facing barriers to employment, folks who may be coming out of addiction recovery, incarceration, or just being laid off from the industries around us in the area. And so this is a reskilling process that helps them learn woodworking, t-shirt printing and manufacturing, solar installation, agriculture, and building renovation. So all of those components have things involved with what we call upcycling, which is, for our wood shop, we deconstruct a lot of old dilapidated buildings and put that wood inside of our wood shop to upcycle into new furniture and material. The t-shirts are all made out of recycled plastic bottles that we upcycle into textiles. And of course, the buildings that we renovate are usually on the demolished list. And so we try and repurpose them to make them into social incubator hubs. So that's some of the context of the region around us right now. Again, it's the #1 exodus state as well. So more people are leaving than being born. So how can we tie all this together, create jobs, create opportunity, while also not leaving behind our due diligence for the environmental factors as well? How can we incorporate something that is notoriously not very economically profitable, like recycling, and make it make sense in an area just devoid of economic opportunity? And so I'll get into a little bit of that later, but to the best of my knowledge, Terry, we just want to sort of establish the groundwork, correct? All right, well, I will stop there then.
Neil, tell us a
Sure.
little bit about your work with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance.
Great. Thank you again for inviting us. Good to see Jacob again, of course. And the Institute is approaching its 50th year. We started out as a community organization in the Adams-Morgan neighborhood of Washington, D.C. We soon became a citywide organization, and then eventually we started taking invitations from other cities across the country. We only work in the United States, but of course we share information abroad and learn a lot from abroad. We are focused on the revival of recycling. We see recycling having a tremendous comeback after the debacle of the China cutoff. We see cities responding, taking direct action. Private sector is investing billions of dollars in end-use capacity, paper mills, plastic mills, etc. We like to focus on composting as well as reuse because the markets for those end products are local and they're year-round. And of course, composting is about 1/3 of the solid waste stream. We focus on reuse because it's the easiest way in the recycling sector to retain value and create good jobs. Good jobs, let's call that $20 an hour plus health benefits. Obviously, that changes as you go from one region of the country and the other. But the point is that we are seeing incredible programs and enterprises come up. I'll just mention a few. Homeboys Industries in Los Angeles. It's a faith-based organization. They recruit young people out of gangs, have programs to get rid of your tattoos, teach people how to manage their families, their households, their budgets, but mainly they give them training on electronic scrap repair and deconstruction, and they have good jobs with health insurance. Recycle Force in Indianapolis. I'll only go into these two because I could go on for a while. Servicing only people who are coming out of prison, ex-offenders. They meet them at the gate. They help them transition to civilian life, and they train them on handling the surplus from our industries. They may get 100,000 dehumidifiers a year, 1 million airline seats or safety seats in cars that have to be dismantled. This is an alternative for big corporations who have this surplus of material coming back. Instead of shredding it and sending it to a landfill or an incinerator, materials, hundreds of thousands of products go to Recycle Force in Indianapolis, and they not only recover the materials, but they use it as the basis of transitioning people into a decent life, having come from incarceration. The other reason is that when you recycle something, you recycle a ton of this or that, and you have to make something of it. But when you repair a computer or another piece of equipment or furniture, as Jacob mentioned, excuse me, or a mattress, you're creating a product, and therefore you have more value added. There are great organizations around the country, Building Materials Reuse Association, Reuse Minnesota, Second Chance in Baltimore, and many other great groups. Earlier this morning, in this program we had two excellent presentations from Michigan. So it's booming. I'll repeat and end here that Dan Knapp and Mary Lou Van Deventer from Urban Ore, an iconic company in this field, point out that repair and reuse and resale is the only part of the recycling sector that pays sales tax. And businesses and reuse organizations and companies are booming. This year, Dan and Mary Lou will pay at least $250,000 in sales tax. So that's what we do, and that's why we do it.
Great. Thank you both. And one of those people that does that work recently retired is our next panelist, Bruce Odom. Bruce, welcome. Tell us your story real quick.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So my first career was a remodeling carpenter for maybe 15 years. When I was in Bellingham, Washington, I was hired as a manager of Resources was the name of the organization. And the store was called the Restore, although nobody even had heard of Habitat for Humanity Restore in Washington State in 1993. So those two names don't have anything to do with each other. And cut my teeth on the business there, worked there for 4 years. It was a material exchange facility that got some bootstrap funding from Department of Ecology to get started. And after the funding ran out after 6 months, they told me, well, you can figure out a way to make this viable and keep your job, or, you know, we did the best we could. So I was highly motivated to figure out a way to make this work. And having a background in carpentry, it was only natural when we had customers asking for things that we didn't get enough of. And I knew that they were in all kinds of remodel jobs and demolition sites, that we whipped together a crew and went out and started bringing some of that stuff home. After 4 years, my wife and I decided to move back to her roots, her hometown of Traverse City. And there we started up our own store for profit. And at the time I had, I decided to make it a for profit. I won't go into all the reasons. And it was a full service, wide spectrum of material type of a store. And we served homeowners, and for as far as sourcing materials, it primarily came from homeowners with, for frequency. As far as the volume of material from one location and the quality of material, it would be primarily contractors or commercial sites or institutional sites. And as far as the sales side goes, similarly, again, probably 80% of our sales was to do-it-yourselfers, i.e. homeowners. And then the 20% was probably sprinkled between artisans and very small businesses that would need a shelf or a light or something like that for their business. And by wide range of materials, I mean that we, instead of just doing the easy building materials that we knew we could make money on, which everybody would automatically focus on, which would be, you know, cabinets and doors and high-end stuff that you can't get enough of. Traverse City's not a large community. Those of you in Michigan know that. And so we couldn't get enough of the antique-y, cool artistic stuff. So I said, well, we're going to deal with sinks and hollow core doors and fluorescent light fixtures, and we're going to deal with little pieces of everything. So I tried really hard, even though I knew I was taking it in and not making any money. And in some cases, I was obviously losing labor dollars on it. We still took that kind of stuff in because it was important to me to be taken as a serious used building material store that had a wide variety of stuff. So somebody would come in looking for A, and if we didn't have A, they'd spin off and go over to B and C and D, and they would find something that they can use. I think that played in our favor. We also had, for exchanging material, we gave people the incentive of when they brought us a $40 worth of sales value of material, we gave them a $10 store credit that had an expiration date of 2 years. And then they would have, one more reason to come back and see us. And they would remember they'd have this credit. And when they needed a door or whatever they might have needed, they'd come in and try and find it with us. And it drove a lot of foot traffic and got us to be a little more of a jump start down that road to building up a customer base. I think I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Bruce. That was good. Okay, so we now have the background of the work that you're all doing. So a couple of questions for each of you. We'll change the order this time. We consider, as I said in my opening remarks, that recycling is basically a tailpipe solution to waste reduction, and you've each been reaching beyond that. So I'd like you to give us some examples of actions you've taken or observed that you feel hold particular value for considerations for small and rural communities. Let's start with Neil this time, and then we'll follow that up. Neil?
Sure. I would encourage people to take a look at the American Recycling Infrastructure Plan put together by the National Recycling Coalition, Zero Waste USA, and my organization, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And what that is, it's a compilation of about 4 other national plans from industry, from government, et cetera, that mostly Bob Geddes from NRC harmonized, I think is a good word. So he came up with one document. It calls for about a $16 billion investment over a 10-year period. Curiously, the industry organization, Recycling Partnership, did a very similar futures budget type thing. They came up with 17.7 billion. So we're in the same ballpark, although the studies are not meant to be compared. The American Recycling Partnership study only looked at single stream recycling and the investment needed there, whereas the ARIP, as we call it, it looks at everything from composting to reuse, et cetera. And right now, we're in the middle of an effort with those 3 organizations and many, many other groups. And we're calling it the Recycling is Infrastructure 2, TOO campaign, in which we are mobilizing the nonprofit Zero Waste Grassroots movement to talk to, on a regular basis, to congressional leaders, to their staff, to the agencies that have to implement all the money that we anticipate coming through in the Clean Seas bill, the jobs infrastructure bill, the soft infrastructure bill, et cetera, billions of dollars. In fact, there's a compost bill that alone has about $2.5 billion in it to support composting. And what we're doing is it's sort of a form of lobbying. We're getting other people to lobby for us since we don't have funds to invest in lobbying, to pressure, as I said, the administration, people in Congress, their staff, so forth, and the agencies, to look at recycling and reuse and composting as a major economic stimulant. And as you look into the economic benefits of reuse, and I'll point out that the University of Maine, Professor Eisenhower, EISENHOUR, is looking into the economic impacts of reuse in a very extensive program. which is yielding a lot of good information. And we're finding the job creation, the value creation, and the addition to community life from reuse, repair, and resale is very energizing for the local communities. And we therefore want more and more money put into these sectors. I'll also mention, first of all, I want to thank Bruce for mentioning Habitat for Humanities and their restores, which I forgot in my list of great programs. And they, of course, pioneered in creating manuals for other other humanity stores to use. So they've been in tremendous influence in this area. And I've been to many Habitat restores, and they too are just bubbling with activity and exchanging money. And the last group I'd like to mention, only because their most recent report, Reuse Minnesota, indicated the jobs creation potential. They have an excellent graphic in their report that shows the job creation and environmental savings and all the remarkable benefits from reuse. I'm going to mention one other group, I'm sorry, Second Chance in Baltimore. We had the privilege of working with them, training their first crews. I want to give out the credit to the rebuilding center in Portland, Oregon, where we got our trainers from. And Second Chance started in 2003 with 6 trained deconstruction workers. They now have over 200 workers, 90% of whom were recruited from the hard to employ people in that community. And that's just one building deconstruction company. They've got a 300,000 foot warehouse. They've expanded in many directions. And it's just one indication of what an investment in reuse can do for a local economy.
Great story. Jacob, we'll let you jump in next, follow up by Bruce.
Gladly. So I grew up in a town of a population of 87 people. So I know all about small towns and their struggles. And so how do we bring them into the conversation? Of course, they're all connected to each other. Small towns are connected to larger towns. There aren't islands in and of themselves, but even the larger towns, which are still small by USDA standards, are experiencing difficulties with recycling and upcycling and infrastructure. Due to the what Neil had mentioned earlier, the National Sword Act in China, a lot of the ripple effect for recycling has been felt throughout the region. And so you can see here some of the sort of major cities in my neck of the woods have either completely halted or radically changed their recycling processes. And so that affects the whole distribution chain system of drivers, processors, collectors, the whole economic and occupational supply chain with that is just disrupted. And so what we try to do is, how do we apply our thinking of upcycling wood, upcycling dilapidated material into value-added products? How do we superimpose that to address this issue in a way that helps communities and not just customers? And so that's where we've introduced what we call the reuse corridor, which is a multi-state, multi-organization coalition of stakeholders throughout the region that are sharing resources that would normally be landfill destined, as you can see in this graphic. Sawdust from our wood shop, instead of paying a driver and a landfill fee and hours to take that sawdust to a landfill, we're now just shipping it in our truck to the university to mix with their food waste from their campus to make high-grade quality compost. Same thing for textiles. It's being shredded and used in a mulching process to grow mushrooms with one of our partners. And of course, our example as well with wood, we're upcycling that to make furniture. So those were like the low-hanging fruits that we identified. How can we just start having conversations with our partners in our region? And that started to grow and grow and grow, because as you see in these counties here, this is rural Appalachia. And so not every county is going to have a recycling center or a Goodwill or a restore or a processing hub. They're going to maybe have one of the 5 things that they need, but maybe the county over has 2 of that, or maybe the county next to that has a different one of the 5. So how can we get that conversation going to where we're fitting each other's gaps and we're creating a wholer, broader picture altogether? Because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts if we work together. And so we've seen that happening more and more. We're getting grants to identify a stakeholder analysis and strategic plans on, are there markets for this? And then utilizing other grants to start testing public facing events, go into these small rural communities like Wayne County, West Virginia, where I'm from, where there's no infrastructure for recycling, but if we host a box truck outside of the city courthouse and say, this is open and free to anyone to come in and drop off these types of items, we will take those items to these partners, these local businesses, these local organizations that are looking for these items as part of their supply chain, whether it be wooden pallets, old electronics, tires, metals, plastics, what have you. Someone's looking for them. And instead of buying them 500 miles away or from Amazon or from wherever, why can't we just get them local for free and not draw costs to the community as well? And so that's what that has looked like from the get-go. These are local community folks coming in and dropping off their materials that they would normally have to pay a tipping fee to or a landfill fee to get rid of. And that's a free resource for local businesses and organizations that are upcycling or repurposing in the region. And then also we're doing events as well, like the Marshall football game at our university here, where we're hosting recycling bins that had never, out of the history of the university that's been over 100 years, it's never recycled an event. And now we're doing that and collecting those materials to be upcycled and processed. The plastics are being melted down into 3D printers. The metals are being compressed and upcycled into new metal products. And we're hosting, you can see on the top left, I think you might recognize that gentleman there, Neil, hosting these conversations together and having those dialogues happen, because the challenges of COVID, where we're not able to be in person, has actually been a benefit, because it's such a wide region in such a rural area. We can all still have that real-time conversation and collaboration to happen. So that's what the patchwork quilt of organizations looks like now. Local governments, nonprofits, businesses, investment organizations, educational institutions, every sort of myriad kind of institution all shares some component of trying to tackle waste. So how can we meet those needs all together in a way that is harmonious and complementary to each other's operations? So these are some of the products that are the final outputs of that. The wood obviously comes from discarded wooden pallets or wood materials. The visor that you see there and the placeholders are plastics that have been melted down and repurposed to make new products. The t-shirts have been made out of recycled plastics into new textiles. And the planches, of course, are made out of plastics as well. We also have a mattress recycler that upcycles mattresses. You can pretty much imagine what that looks like. It's just one mattress to another mattress using different components. And also a tire recycler as well that shreds down the tires and makes new products. So it's really awesome to be able to see that democratized process to where there isn't really a big gun in town that handles all the recycling. So we have to make the solutions for ourselves, because there isn't the traditional infrastructure or demand or demographic to actually justify a massive investment of a large scale recycling center. So how can we do it in small satellite scales? So I'll stop there.
Excellent, great. Bruce, what would you like to add to this?
There we go. There we go. Well, my experience has been on a smaller scale, but wow, Jacob, that is awesome what's going on. Ready to move to Appalachia and jump into the game and unretire.
Come on down.
Yeah, that's very exciting stuff. That's what needs to be happening in every community. Why not? Why not? So my actions have been to start as I had already mentioned, the store, and have an exchange feature where people can get rid of what they don't want, just as we're all talking about, and then have an opportunity to buy something they do want. And so not every store has, I don't believe I know every Habitat Humanities store I've been into, maybe the half dozen or so, don't have anything like an exchange credit. They do give you a tax deductible receipt, so you're getting some kind of value back. So we would give folks a store credit, and then we try to engage the community. And here's where I think the part I don't know if it's necessarily my forte, but it's a part I certainly have the most fun at, is engaging the community and doing marketing. And so some of the things we've done very early on, I wanted to have a mascot out in front of our store. You've all been to metal yards where they have a robot made out of all the metal pieces, and he's standing there greeting you as you come in. Well, I didn't exactly want to do that, but I wanted to have a sculpture of some kind, and I'm not a sculptor. So I went to the community college and talked to the one of the art department folks, and a design course instructor decided that when I called him up and got him on the phone, I said, we'd like to have a reuse moose out front because rhymes. And I'd like to have it made out of, 75% used materials, and if possible, and if we can make 50% of that, 51% of that used building materials, that would be really great. I was trying to, not blow the guy away with wild expectations. He was all over it. He's going, oh man, we'll make it 100% used and 100% used building materials. I go, you're my guy. So it was a design course. So he had a contest within his class and gave everybody that assignment. And to this day, I still recall the one that had drawn kitchen double basin sinks for the antlers, it's like, so I went through all those and had a lot of fun and had some laughs. And he picked the one that he thought was the most practical to get built. And then his students came to our store and built it in our truck bay, and we provided the materials, and they built it. And when it got built and done, I got the local newspaper, and this is a big benefit of being in a itty bitty town. You call up the local paper, and if you do anything at all that's a little interesting, they'll come out and take your picture. And so I got the contractors where we got the materials from to come out with their hard hats, and the art instructor and the kids and myself, and we all had a picture taken with the reused moose. They liked it so well, they brought it to the annual fundraiser picnic that the college has, where the art class was from. So that was all kinds of fun. And then after we had that up there for, well, not very long, we couldn't resist the idea of decorating it for one of the holidays. Well, that spun off into decorating it for 6 major holidays. My favorite was we put decorations on it for Halloween and turned it into the Headless Mooseman, where a guy was riding it and holding a pumpkin out in his outstretched hand. And our customers would not know too much more about the store if they weren't doing any remodeling and didn't happen to need building materials at that point in their life. But everybody in town knew about that sculpture out front, and they all commented what their favorite one was in the course of the year. Well, that's a lot about the moose. We did home tours for 9 years running, most consecutive years, where customers that had installed a significant amount of used building materials would agree to do a walkthrough tour of their home. And we would sell tickets and carpool and go around and see how folks had used their materials. And it was always interesting and inspiring to see how people have installed used stuff and how well it fits their house. But what I never, ever got tired of hearing is the story of they did the search, and when they found the perfect thing, how excited and energized they were, and how it made their whole project just sparkle with energy that it was just electric how you'd pick that up from them. And I would just keep on doing that. You got a comment there, Neil, or you have had this experience?
I want to say that this is such a wonderful anecdote, Bruce, because having fun is a big part of success in a community and in an enterprise. And I don't want to interrupt you any longer, but let me say this. I've spent many afternoons at Urban Ore in Berkeley, just hanging out with Dan and Mary Lou in the parking lot. Did the same thing with Construction Junction outside of Pittsburgh. And you watch a flow of people bringing stuff in and a flow of people carrying stuff out, and they were all happy. And what more can you say? And there's another thing. People get a big thrill when someone else gets a pleasure from what they're giving away. So these are very human things that we're getting into. We're getting these feelings involved with environmental consciousness. So that was a great anecdote. I will remember it.
Thanks. Thank you. We also did a design build contest with Finlandia University up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. and similar contest, although they kicked up the quality level up a notch, and we got two different product design ideas from them of products, simple products we made in the store. We also, on a spin-off of products made out of used building materials, we went through for about 4 or 5 years, we got in bowling lanes when we could get them at an affordable price before they got to be super popular and we couldn't afford to buy them anymore. And we would make kitchen tables out of them, and then inspire our customers to buy a hunk of bowling lane and bring it home and do it themselves. And then lastly, this is something that actually started at my resources employment store in Bellingham, Washington, and it worked so very well, I immediately carried it over when I opened my own store, was Free Friday. And you're gonna, no matter how good of a retailer you are and marketer you are, you're gonna have stuff that you just can't sell in a reasonable amount of time. And if you don't get rid of it somehow, you're gonna just, you know, they'll come in one day and just find your hands sticking out of this pile of used building material because you've been buried alive in it. So Free Friday, we take stuff that has had a good shot at getting sold and didn't sell and gather it all together and put it out in our parking lot for free. And holy cow, people would come and strap down stuff to the tops of their Volkswagen Beetles till the tires are ready to blow out and drive away. And I would watch the material get smaller and smaller until it disappeared. And then I'd hit my employee on the shoulder and say, see that? That's waste reduction. It's gone. Can't see it anymore. So that was so popular. I would be in a grocery store and a cashier, 17-year-old gal, would probably not have any interest in building materials whatsoever ordinarily. And when I mentioned to her that we had the store that sold used building materials, she'd say, oh, you're the ones that have that Free Friday. She didn't know anything about other stuff we did, but she knew we had Free Friday, the alliteration of it, or the fact that you gave away something for free. So yeah, we definitely had some fun. I'll stop there.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, very fun. And actually, the interchange here has made me think of a different question to ask than I was going to ask. So don't mean to take anybody out of left field. You've all addressed it in an indirect way, but usually the industry measures waste by either volume or weight. The third way they measure it is how much money has been saved or moved around. We emphasize the economic and the environmental impacts of recycling and waste reduction. But we talk very little, except the three of you haven't, about the social capital that's built. So my question is going to direct us towards that social capital piece. How, as we look for opportunities in small rural areas trying to build waste reduction through recycling and other actions like reuse and reduce, how do we also ensure that we're building and amplifying the value of the social capital? And let me start this time. Whoever wants to go first, whoever has an idea wants to respond to that.
I'll just kick this off and make one short statement. Teaching people skills is transferable. If you teach someone a skill in deconstructing a house or deconstructing a computer, that person uses the skill, the discipline that he and or she acquires and applies it to the rest of their lives. So the social impact is quite direct. And here's one anecdote from a major building deconstruction. We were taking down public housing in a pretty rundown neighborhood of DC. And basically it was a terrific program. And we had people, trained workers, men and women, say to us, you know, it's always a struggle finding a job. If I get these skills, I won't need to find a job. I could do things by myself. So I think both individually, psychologically, and in the community, a person with a good job and self-confidence is the most valuable citizen you can have.
I thought that Jacob actually did mention quite a few social capital benefits and outcomes through his programs with folks that were reassembling and finding a source for the raw materials, and then making a value-added product to that, and then having a product they can sell. And so, whereas there previously wasn't the opportunity to have that happen because of logistics, because of economics, because of a concentration of the material in one place, because of their program, now it can. And so that's a really beautiful thing, that they're creating businesses. And Neil, as you said perfectly, it's just somebody who's being industrious. That's just, that's so important, so very important. Yeah.
It's healing, and I appreciate you touching on that topic. And I want to share a really provoking image here, if I can. Are you able to see this?
Yep.
This is 5,000 tires pulled out of the Tug Fork River outside the town that I was born in, Williamson, West Virginia. This is where we also get our drinking water from for the city. We're about 1,500 people there in that town. So not only are these tires being used for a recycling purpose, an economic purpose, a supply chain purpose, but you're literally improving the health of the people behind that flood wall that you see up there, all the residents in there that are counting on that water supply. There's a massive issue with thyroid illnesses, which is the body's natural filter for things like cancerous materials. There's a massive overweight epidemic as well. And all these health factors, I mean, it doesn't take much to know how these are linked. And so the more that we can integrate reuse into this, the more the community will benefit from the health factors, the social factors, and also just the mental relief of being able to go outside of your house on the other side of that flood wall and look at a beautiful river and not see something that is just littered with garbage and tires, but instead something that is an asset to the community, to where now this very same river is host to a fishing contest, a flyman fishers contest. There's now boat tours, kayak races up and down the river. There's a local watershed group that's formed to sort of help reintegrate fish back into that system. So all those things have been allowed to flourish because of the one removal of that issue, where folks didn't have a place to take tires, they didn't have a place to recycle, so they knew the one place they could take it where it wouldn't be seen was in a river. And so now we're liberating that pain and offering so many other connected opportunities as well. And one thing I want to touch on as well is abandoned strip mines. This is an abandoned strip mine that used to produce coal in West Virginia. And now whenever you strip the top of a mountain off, it's a moonscape, it's rock. There's no soil there that can grow. And so we're trying to start a large-scale composting facility on top of that surface to where we're able to rebuild a soil layer again. And there can be agriculture that takes place. Folks can get their local food grown nearby instead of, not having a food desert in their area. Same thing with the infrastructure. This used to be an old steel building here in Huntington, West Virginia, that we're repurposing. It's called the Black Diamond Facility. It's going to be a materials aggregation and sorting hub that we just got a $500,000 cleanup grant to process and rehabilitate. And so don't underestimate the narrative, the fundraising narrative of this as well. We were able to leverage a $2 million ARC grant too to build out some jobs, some staffing, some training, some business models to be built, technical assistance to take place, industrial shredders purchased. And that's a federal organization that believes that recycling is a job maker now because of the argument that we've made. So that is what's more social alleviating than a job that pays well? So it's all connected, and the more that you can interconnected, the more powerful it is. I'll stop there.
I would like to add to that. First of all, congratulations on that grant. That's going to be a big change and a big growth spurt. And remember to invite us down to the opening for your facility. That'll be fun. But I also want to say that what we've heard from Bruce and Jacob, the reuse project, the reuse people in California that have 16 for-profit and nonprofit network, these are new business forms. These are contributions to the business community. These types of organizations haven't existed before. The structure for reuse, the reuse corridor is unique. There are other networks, of course. St. Vincent de Paul has a great network out west in the Cascade Alliance, and they're doing great things, but they're under one umbrella. Both models are sensational, and of course, the Habitat for Humanity. So we're making social, economic, environmental, as well as business innovations with the reuse industry.
I don't want to stop any of you guys. You're adding a lot to the mix of helping people think beyond just simply recycling the basic elements here. But we got time for maybe one more general question, and then I invite questions that come in from any of the folks who are watching this here, attending this this afternoon. So if you were moving to a small town that you hadn't lived in before, and you got there and you saw that there wasn't any kind of recycling waste reduction program, and you, or maybe there was one, but it was sort of anemic, like the one that I've been dealing with for 30 years, which is basically runs a monthly recycling drive of the basics. What would you advise, or where would you throw your energy initially to build something beyond that? We'll start with Jacob, go to Bruce, and let Neil hit the back cleanup on that one.
Sure.
Sure thing. I would look at what are the pieces that are in play right now. What are the schools? What are the businesses, churches, organizations? What's the DNA of where I'm at right now? And what's missing from the DNA? What's there that can be an advantage? So even if it's just a mom and pop store that makes steering wheels for cars, they're going to be receiving a lot of cardboard every day to bring in new materials for their supply chain. That cardboard, I know, is going to be a cost to them to either dump in a landfill or try and go with some sort of large-scale recycler that's 500 miles away. Either way, that's a pain point for them. That's a burden for them. But it's also supply. So who might be looking for that supply? So I look at, who in the region might be upcycling or creating new materials. Well, there's a Goodwill in town, and Goodwill actually shreds cardboard and makes stuffing out of it, makes new cardboard out of it. So how can I connect that business with that nonprofit and get that? Just the small hanging fruits is what you want to go for first. You don't try and start with making an industrial recycler that can handle glass and plastic and everything all at once, because you're just going to spin your tires until you've got nothing in you. Sooner you can start with just alleviating the pain of recycling, alleviating the cost of it, alleviating the burden and the barriers to entry. That's when it's most readily adoptable. It makes sense financially to any business that would ever have a bottom line, and it helps empower the supply chains at a local level. So you're already, circulating more dollars than sending dollars out that you're never going to see again. So already you're having win-win-wins there, and you're building that trust and that community and that network that will then help support larger initiatives. So say, oh yeah, well, I know Mr. So-and-so, you helped me, cut a lot of my costs for my waste stream there, for my wooden pallets that I had to pay to get rid of it. Now old Tony is upcycling that wood to make chicken coops. Yeah, I'll be happy to sign a letter of support to get this grant for, a tire recycling facility. I think that's a great idea. And it builds and builds and builds. So start there, start local, start with the low-hanging fruits, and that forms your foundation for real systems change.
Great.
Oh. Yes, we should do that. I don't know how much I can add to what Jacob has said and his organization's already doing. I was going to suggest have some kind of an exchange facility, whatever you can pull together. So the smallest amount of energy might be something going on to an online exchange. So there are various online exchanges. You guys can tell me the names of them quicker, and they're slipping my mind. I mean, Craigslist would have a source for free stuff, and the local newspaper in Traverse City had a free column. They used to when we were there, and they might still. And so having an online exchange so that when you have something that you want to be rid of and it just so happens to be something that another person can use, there you go. They just connect just like you're making a sale of something. It could be a free exchange. Free cycle is another one. If there is the luxury of having a physical location, so maybe small communities, the space isn't so extremely expensive as in a bigger urban area. And so there might be a place to have an exchange facility, but nobody to staff it. There might be a way to try and coincide with a dumpster day type of a annual or every 6 year swap day, and have it at this public area. And it'd be nice if it at least had a snow fence around it so stuff doesn't go blowing all over the place. And when I go to, I was telling Terry before we started, the local, they call them dumpster days here in Grand Rapids. I spend most of my time pulling stuff out of people. They're on their way to the dumpster with it, and I go, no, and I'm dragging it over my truck and loading up my truck with it instead of helping them fill the dumpster. It's like, you guys have got this all backwards. So you can't certainly have everybody out there and having a free for all, and then two people both want the same thing at the same moment. So if there's work through it for whatever works for you and for the space you've got and the number of volunteers you've got, at a minimum, have somebody that has a little bit of experience with construction materials or a little bit of experience with retailing that maybe used to work at a Habitat or a Goodwill present at one of these cleanup facilities. They can be the ones pulling stuff aside and putting it into the fenced off area, not a real big area. You'd have to be concerned about the wind. You'd have to be concerned about rain destroying or lowering the value of the material. But if you just agreed to set it aside for a small finite period of time and then let the public know that, hey, by the way, we had our dumpster days on Saturday and there's all this cool stuff out there. Why don't you come on by after work and drive by and grab what you can? And might work. I mean,
Okay.
that would be pretty low hanging fruit too. I don't think the average person has to be convinced that we shouldn't be throwing so much stuff away. I think that they all already know it. I mean, I've taken so much inspiration from my own customers. Very early on at my own store, a fella came to the back door with a whole bunch of storm windows, and he told me what he had before I went out to see them. And I went, oh, geez, you know, not too many people come looking for storm windows. It's not an item that I have had luck selling at the previous store. And so I don't know if I could really use them. And he said, oh, really? And then by that time we were at his car and he opened it up and he took them out. And he had put each pair of storm windows from each window into the cardboard box that the new ones came in. So that it was completely organized. They were all mated together. He had all the different little springs and pieces. It's like, I can't turn this down. The guy's done half my job for me. It's like, and he was so into it and he was so proud of the job he did. It's like, and I, of course, I had no trouble selling all those. So it's like, people are already halfway there. They're more than halfway there. We just have to do a little bit to help.
Thank you, Bruce.
I will add that I agree with Bruce wholeheartedly. People are predisposed to like recycling and to like to see their old stuff used, and they like to get the deals and get things for their own house. I would, as I said before, the thing I would encourage people in a small town to do is focus on composting and reuse. Composting because it's easy. It's 1/3 the waste stream. You could always find a progressive restaurant owner to participate in your first pilot. We did this in Ocean City to great effect. And as far as the other reuse, I would point people back to what we heard this morning from Brian, Esther Williams from Midland, and Brian, I forget his last name, from Ann Arbor, who pointed out that they got started small, they became part of the community trusted them, the community liked what they were doing, and in the small town, everyone knows what you're doing, and you could move forward from there. You could go get your constituency together, bug your county or city to do curbside and other things. You could grow from there, as Ann Arbor has grown into a major player They're on contract with the city, etc. So I would start small with reuse and composting, and build from there, and get the confidence and the influence that you can have in your town and county.
Terry, you're still muted.
Yeah, I'm still muted. Some people want to mute me entirely, so it's probably not such a bad idea. I want to thank each of you, Neil, Jacob, and Bruce, for making the time today to share your knowledge, your insights into this waste challenges that we face. You guys are leaders in how we think about this. We obviously dealing with things like climate change, pandemics, and other things like that. People don't see the linkages necessarily to waste. But if we think about all the embodied energy that goes into making what we use as being wasted and unrecoverable, we know that somewhere in the nexus there's that. And each of you has brought forward to me, again, re-emphasized for me, because I believe very strongly, the role of social capital, that there is this community sense that gets built around this between all the players in the exchanges that take place at, whether it's at Bruce's store or at Jacob's reuse corridor, whether it's prisoners or people that are wealthy donating their time. And we don't measure it enough, and we don't put it front and center. We always argue for the economic reasons, but the social is what's going to keep the glue together, especially in small communities. I think the stories that are coming out of Appalachia are particularly strong, as people there are struggling on so many levels. So I'm glad that this is being recorded. I also want to thank my colleague and friend Bill Stow for joining me in this project and working together these last 8 months and over the next one or so, while we finish up a report that we will share with everybody, including our panelists here, for more insights, because we don't assume to know everything there is to know. Also, I want to especially thank, from the MSU Center for Community and Economic Development, Brogan Eisler, who's been managing the webinars today and helped set that up and get the word out, and Jennifer Bruin, who is overseeing the project from their end. But I also want to thank those of you who have just dialed in to spend your time in Michigan today. It's a beautiful, sunny autumn day, temperatures in the 70. A lot of people that signed up probably did not join in, saying, "Oh, I'm not passing this one up." So we're thankful for those of you who have done so and have spent their time with us. This will be recorded. This will be put up on YouTube probably within a week or so. Anybody that has registered for this will be notified when it's available. Any last words from the three of you?
Keep on recycling.
Yeah, you can feel free to visit our website that we just put online too to learn more information. It's, just look up Reuse Corridor with Coalfield. You'll find us.
Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you
Take
all.
care. Stay healthy.
Bye-bye.